Is this one working? Cool, cool. All right, 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad that you could join us here today at Glasgow for This is What Climate Finance Looks Like, Funding Climate Resilience in Small Island Developing States. We all know well that island nations have contributed little to the devastating impacts of climate change that they are currently feeling. These nations have made it clear that scaling up support for from the global north must be a priority for the UN Climate Change Conference, COP26, here today and beyond. While the volume of available funding has increased, the 100 billion promised in commitments to the developing world has not been delivered yet. The international climate finance system has become increasingly burdensome, complex, and funder requirements and project development processes mean that small island developing states cannot get access to this funding fast enough. Alongside these lengthy development approval, we need, this is what creates an access bottleneck in climate finance. So with that said, I'm Ben Bartle. I'm the project director for RMI's Climate Finance Access Network and the moderator for today's event. Today we're welcoming representatives from SIDS themselves, including Cfan's first cohort from the Pacific region. Unfortunately, our representative from Papua New Guinea was called into a meeting to prepare for a speech of his Prime Minister at the last minute. So I'll be reading some quotes from Papua New Guinea and highlighting the projects that Cfan will be working on. We will discuss on the focus on capacity challenges and that these island nations are facing and how scaling up the Cfan model into other regions will serve best as a force of multiplying and leveraging climate finance. Today's conversation will highlight the importance of direct, accessible climate finance and how it can help countries survive and thrive in a warming world. It is on that note, and as I said, unfortunately, Mr. William Lacane, the Acting Managing Director of Climate Change and Development from Papua New Guinea. Couldn't make it today. But I will present some quotes from Mr. Ruel Yamuna, the former Manager Director of the Climate Change and Development Authority in Papua New Guinea. Not only has the 100 billion failed to materialize, but the system for accessing it has become obstructively complex, and we know what our priorities are and which projects we have to develop. We need to ensure that we have the capacity to deliver and finance them. The Cfan support that will be provided for Papua New Guinea includes supporting mobilizing climate finance through domestic revenue generation activities for the purposes of co-financing and implementing the National Biodiversity Climate Trust Fund and implementation of PNG's National SDG 13 Climate Action Roadmap. Developing and submitting, another area that Cfan will be supporting is developing and submitting climate finance funding proposals, including by navigating the range of financing sources, engaging stakeholders to fulfill funding proposal requirements, and assessing financial instruments to structure investments that are prioritized by national stakeholders. Supporting and identifying these and prioritizing actions for PNG through the National Adaptation Plan and developing these projects that have been identified into bankable project proposals to submit to funders such as the Green Climate Fund, Adaptation Fund, and Global Environment Facility. Cfan will also support analyzing financial data and use financial projections to design and make recommendations for suitable financial structures in the country, and will also provide coordination support to the Climate Change Development Authority and Department of Foreign Affairs to engage with regional and international funding sources and initiatives with a view towards crowding in climate finance through donor coordination. This is where the advisor that is soon to be hired will sit within the Ministry, within the Department of Climate Change Development Authority, and will be supporting them directly from within their offices. So, many thanks to Papua New Guinea for providing the quotes for today, and they send their regards. Unfortunately, they couldn't join us. I'd now like to welcome our colleague, Mr. Francis Bijon, Director of Environment and Climate Change Canada, and Cfan's primary funder. It is with Canada's support that Cfan was actually able to launch this year, and we're very grateful for that opportunity and for Canada's support. And we applaud their leadership on enabling and supporting the important and critical issue of climate finance access to SIDS. Welcome to the stage, Francis.
I hate when I have to lower this. Thanks, Ben. Hi, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here today. I mean, there's so many things that you said, Ben, in your introduction that resonate a lot with the work that Canada has been doing on the climate finance front. So let me start by where you started as well. So let's talk about the 100 billion goal and where we sit. So as all of you know, we've delivered a climate finance delivery plan not too long ago that shows the trajectory to reaching the 100 billion goal. We've accepted our responsibility, and we've accepted the fact that we will fall short in 2020, but we are extremely happy to be able that our efforts from the donor perspective and from developed countries, so we're talking about budgetary efforts, will lead to a successful outcome and that we have confidence that the goal will soon be met. So that's number one. So meeting the goal is one thing, but making sure that it reaches those that need it the most is probably even more important. And on that issue, Canada is extremely proud to be the main contributor for Cfan. And I have beautiful notes that my team has written for me that I won't read, unfortunately. So apologies for all of you who write notes for others. And I'm not really good with that. But I want to go back a little because Cfan for me is not only something that I'm proud of from a government perspective, but it's something that I'm personally proud of. And all of that work goes back to 2018, 2019, when Canada hosted the G7, and there was someone within the Rocky Mountain Institute that was quite seized with that notion of accessing finance. That individual is now in a very senior position with BlackRock and remains a dear friend today, Paul Bottleneck. But Paul and his team, and I'm thinking about Carolyn and I'm thinking about Lucy within RMI, really were able to bring this spark and this idea of the needs that Cfan could help to address. And I've been in conversation, I was part in conversations with all of them since the beginning, looking from the bottleneck issue of climate finance funds to trying to identify solutions. So from Canada's perspective and from my own personal perspective, it's really incredibly cool to be standing here today and thinking that we can play a small role in being part of the solution in addressing the problems from a macro perspective. We're looking at the 100 billion itself, but also in ensuring that we find locally, nationally driven solutions to access where we invest our money as donors. So that's really critical on that. So Garrett, no pressure, but it'd be great to have New Zealand on board. So I'm going to stop on this note and say that seeing Cfan coming to fruition with the first cohort being deployed is really, really amazing, and I want to commend you for your work. Really good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francis, for those extremely kind words. And it's always an honor to have for such passion backing Cfan as well from Canada. Without further ado, I'd like to present Cfan's director, a colleague of mine, Leticia Demares. She was going to offer a very brief overview of Cfan, the Cfan's model, and which is a new approach and what we have to offer. So I'll hand the floor over to you and the remote as well.
Thank you very much. I have to lower it too. Thank you very much, Francis, for those kind words. And as Ben said, it's great that we are so aligned and we can feel the passion and the energy. And I think this COP really need a positive signal that we are looking for solution and we are going beyond just words, but really looking for action on the ground. I'm beyond honored to be among such distinguished panelists today. And also I would like to thank our host, AOSIS, for giving us the opportunity to share with you this launch of Cfan and bringing together experiences and perspective from different regions of SIDS. So I wanted to start with this cartoon that we have borrowed from our colleagues at SPC in the Pacific, because this is very often what accessing climate finance looks like. It really looks like an ordeal for many countries, small countries, capacity-constrained countries. And as Francis was mentioning, this is the starting point for Cfan, is recognizing that there is a problem, and the problem is that those countries that need it the most to access climate finance, that have contributed the least to the problem of climate change, find themselves not in a position to access their fair share. So recognizing this issue, we went to work, and with the great involvement of the team that Francis recognized before. Oops, sorry. I'm a bit stuck here. Can you? No. So All right. So in 2018-2019, RMI conducted a very broad and inclusive consultation process. About 100 stakeholders from 45 developing countries, mostly seeds and LDCs, were consulted about what are the key challenges for accessing climate finance and how can we address this bottleneck. And what came out of this consultation is, first of all, countries know more or less where they need to invest for their climate finance. They know what are the priority sectors, they know where the urgency is, and most of them have already went through planning processes. Think of NDCs, NAPs, you name it. They have all those plans on the shelf, ready to be implemented. But the capacity that is missing is precisely on the downstream part of the project cycle. How you take those plans, those targets, and you translate them into bankable projects. So we decided that that's going to be the focus. A lot of technical assistance is provided more upstream in the project cycle. We decided that Cfan's primary focus would be to support developing a project and structuring the finance. And we had a resounding demand from countries to provide capacity that would be embedded in countries. In countries meaning in ministries, and this is a relatively recent development of Cfan in direct access entities. Those entities, as you may know, are entrusted by government to develop on their behalf projects to the main climate fund, the GCF, or the adaptation fund. So that was for us, our mandate was laid out for us, that is to provide this support to develop project and structure the finance. Also from the consultation, we derived the key principles of Cfan. And Ben was mentioning a new model, and it's really the aspiration. We want to bring about a new approach to providing support to seeds and LDCs in developing projects. So the key principles, first of all, the climate justice principle, because it's not by accident that Cfan is focusing on seeds and LDCs. Those are the most vulnerable to climate change. Leading by examples. If you have been in the negotiations, you know that seeds and LDCs have been the moral voices of the negotiation. They have put the 1.5 degree target on top of the agenda again and again. And they are now, just like all of us, in the implementation phase of the Paris Agreement and wish to lead now by example. Most of them have committed to carbon neutrality by 2050, and they are now going to the next step in their engagement against climate change. The country drivenness and responsiveness, as well as country ownership, is also, that's the cornerstone of Cfan. We work from, first of all, we work on demand. Countries request the support, and we work also from their own priorities, their own perspective, and their own targets. So the mandate of those advisors that will be deployed in the countries is co-designed, those terms of reference, co-designed with the government or the entity that will be hosting the advisors. It is very important for us that we respond to the needs and the priorities of the countries. The capacity building component of Cfan is extremely important. It's not just about posting those advisors for a year or two in an entity or ministry, and then they would leave, and the capacity would leave with them. The idea is to build lasting capacity in country. So those advisors will always will have the task as well to conduct capacity building activities in the country. And I think an important point is also that those advisors are being hired locally. We are not deploying advisors that are already established or, international consultants. We are looking for those talents in the region that want to invest in the climate finance space, and they get trained for about 6 weeks, a very robust training that we are developing again with the support from Canada, and with the hope that this capacity, this expertise, is not only going to stay, but going to grow and going to be multiplied by those advisors. I mentioned that we are now considering supporting direct access entities, which is a recent evolution, because we identified that the same bottleneck happens at those entities level that are also lacking the capacity. And finally, something also that Cfan is going to focus on through the support we are going to provide to those advisors is the opening up the options of financing instruments for seeds and LDCs. Very often the projects are focusing on those traditional instruments that are grants and sometimes concessional loans, but we have now an array of potential instruments. There are a lot of very inspirational projects with very innovative approaches that we can learn from. So we really want to encourage having an open mind when it comes to the financial structuring of the project and use blended finance opportunities. Whoops. The way Cfan works is we didn't want to duplicate efforts that are out there. So as you know, there are already some initiatives providing technical assistance that I mentioned before, mostly on the upstream part of the project cycle. So Cfan is a network. We work with regional and global organizations. So the idea is those organizations will be working with us, hiring and deploying those advisors, supporting them technically throughout their mandate. And those advisors are trained as a cohort in each region. And it is our hope that they will be working together, learning from each other, exchanging best practices. And as Cfan expands to other regions, starting with the Pacific, then to the Caribbean, and to LDCs in Africa, that also those cohorts can exchange and learn from each other. So basically, we want to establish a community of practice, and we want Cfan to be a best practice initiative. So we learn from our members, and we learn from all the approaches that came before us. So our membership is growing. We have 18 members at the moment, both regional and international organizations. As I was mentioning, an important part of Cfan is the country-drivenness and ownership. So the development of the mandates of those advisors, their work plan basically, is really developed in collaboration with the government. And another point I wanted to mention is the very governance of Cfan ensures that the countries that are benefiting from the support are also contributing, inputting continuously into the model. So we will also be learning from how the experience is working for those governments receiving the support. So we don't want only to have an impact at the local level, but we want this feedback loop also to learn from the initiative. And hopefully we have with us today someone, Nadia, who is sitting on the board of the GCF and has this opportunity to bring that feedback to the decision makers in the main financing institutions. So to sum up, cost efficiency, not duplicating existing efforts, ensuring local ownership, having the maximum impact possible, and being agile is very important. We want to be responsive. You've heard, I'm sure, in the negotiation, the frustration that it takes so long to access climate finance. So Cfan is going to act as an accelerator, but to be effective, Cfan has to be fast itself. So we want to ensure that from the moment a country requests our support, it's going to be 3 to 6 months until an advisor is deployed, hired, trained, and deployed. And that's also why we are here locally, because that makes it more, I wouldn't say easier, but more practical. So those are the first 8 countries that have requested support from Cfan, all in the Pacific. Fiji, Kiribati, Papua New Guinea, Samoa, Solomon Islands, Tonga, Tuvalu, and Vanuatu. So in these countries, the advisors are being hired right now and are going to start training very soon. So we are very excited. We have met with several of the representatives of those countries here in the corridors. And well, I can tell you that we are all very excited and really ready to hit the ground. And I just wanted to finish by showing the networks, the Cfan network. That's what makes our strength. Not only the model we are trying to promote, but the support that we will be able to deliver to those advisors. As you can see, it's 18 members. It's a mix of different expertise, different sectors. We have a research institute. We have implementing partners that are more working on the ground. We have sectoral expertise such as adaptation with the NAB Global Network. And you see also regional organizations that are also accredited to the GCF. So this network is really very powerful. We will be able to really backstop those advisors continuously, and we hope expand our cohorts through all the seeds region. So our goal, we're setting goals here. Our goal is to deploy up to 30 advisors by the end of next year, and up to 50 advisors by the end of 2023. So it might not sound much, but 50 advisors is a third of all developing countries. So we expect Cfan to have really a global impact and to make a difference that could be seen in the numbers of how much finance flows into the regions within the next 2 to 3 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Letitia. Very interesting description of how Cfan operates. And we'd love to hear some more from our panelists this afternoon. We've already heard from Mr. Francis Pigeon. I'm also pleased to welcome Ms. Nadia Spencer-Henry, the Debt Manager for the Ministry of Finance and Corporate Governance, Antigua and Barbuda, as well as the alternate SIDS GCF board member at the Green Climate Fund. And also sitting next to her is Mr. Garrett Hulse, the Foreign Policy Manager in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, New Zealand. It's an honor to have you all here with us today, once again. We will have time for questions at the end of the panel discussion. So I ask if you will please just wait till the end. But now to dive in. So this is firstly a question for you, Mr. Pigeon. Donor countries on our panel today have recently made new climate finance pledges for the next few years. Can you tell us very briefly about your plans to ensure the timely scaling up and delivery of your support to the Global South and SIDS in particular, please?
Thank you. That's open. Yep. Maybe I should remove that. Thanks, Ben. So yeah, indeed. So Canada announced in June 2021 that we were going to double our climate finance commitment from $2.65 billion over 2016 to 2021 to $5.3 billion for the coming 5 years. So we really kind of saw that as something we needed to do as part of the broader donor community, and we're quite happy that in the last few weeks and months, many of the donors in developed countries have came forward with ambitious commitment as well. So we're on track to meet the 100 billion goal. Before the panel started, we were just joking amongst each other in terms of the plans for the future. That's always a difficult question to answer, right? Because we're all subject to parliamentary processes and approvals, and things take time. And you've all already spoken to that in what Cfan is trying to get to and the root problem behind all of that. I think that for us, what's more important is that our investment do not contribute to this problem even further, and that by trying to tackle the access issue, we don't yet create another barrier that makes it even more difficult for developing countries to access these resources. I think we need to look at the access lens through all of our investments, whether it's the GCF, whether it's the GEF, whether it's through the MDBs. We need to use as donor countries, our positions as shareholders of MDBs, and sitting on the board and governance bodies of those organizations to really push them further to make sure that the money gets where it needs to be. So I think that's a very concrete and non-financial action that we as developed countries really need to look into. And it's how we leverage that financier role to ensure that those organizations that are responsible and accountable to us in delivering those massive sums of money do it in a way that is reaching those that need it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Francis. So this next question goes to Ms. Spencer-Henry and as well as yourself. We want to focus this conversation really on the issues of access. So funding commitments can only really go so far, as we all know, if they can't easily be accessed by countries, if they can't develop projects fast, if they can't get funding from global climate funds or even from domestic resources. So, Ms. Spencer-Henry, you sit on the board of the GCF. Can you tell us in your own experience, what are some of the main challenges faced by SIDS in accessing their fair share of climate finance?
Wow, I could talk about this all afternoon, but SIDS face quite a few problems. From what I've seen at the board, there are very few SIDS that are accredited to the GCF, that's first of all. And so often SIDS come via some direct access entity that's usually an MDB or some type of private sector organization, and they come as a group simply because they cannot afford to do it on their own. And because of that, their projects tend to stay in the pipeline for quite a long time. A bit about why that is so. So when a direct access entity enters a country or tries to work with a country, they generally don't get up and running in understanding what the local context is right away. And at the GCF, we're very concerned about country ownership. So one of the things that the entity has to show is country ownership. It also has to clearly explain climate rationale in that country. And when you're doing it for multiple SIDS, while we all have similar problems, each country is unique. And so each problem has to be addressed uniquely. Another problem, simple as understanding what a template is and which template should be used for the type of project that you're trying to access. Understanding the correct thematic area that you're trying to work with. Looking at how other issues may be affecting climate rationale. For example, a project may be held up on the Montreal Protocol, which is not strictly climate, but at the same time may find its way into a climate adaptation project, like a cooling project, for example. And a lot of times, small island states don't understand the sophistication and the distinction between these things. And this is why something like Cfan helps them to understand the language, be able to explain climate rationale clearly, so that when it gets to the board, it doesn't stay in the pipeline for a very long time. One of the things we've been trying to do at the board is to try to help these countries to push their projects through the pipeline, such that we keep insisting that at each board meeting, the Secretariat brings back the projects to us that are in pipeline so that we can see how they've advanced, so that we can push it along. Because otherwise, a country could find itself in this process for up to 5 years. And in the meantime, you've faced several climate events and you're needing more investment than you originally applied for. So it could be a very difficult process for a SID, but with the help, the adequate help, something that's fit for purpose for the country, then they can access the financing.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ms. Spencer-Henry. I myself know very well the process of developing GCF projects, and having worked on one for a 5-year period, I know exactly what you're talking about. So, Mr. Pigeon, I imagine this climate finance bottleneck is also an issue that's frustrating for Canada as well, for donors. What do you think can be delivered really at COP26 on that particular issue of the bottleneck?
Thanks for the easy question, Ben. when I don't know what to say, I usually make a joke. That's how my kids know and can guess what my mood is. I mean, that's a... Earlier, I made a comment about by trying to tackle the access issue, let's try hard not to make it complex itself. Access is becoming some sort of a buzzword. I don't know about you, but I mean, this is something you've mentioned it. We hear through negotiations, right? So negotiations has to some extent become mainstreamed, right? Access is now something that we are talking about, and they're all seized by. Fiji and the UK share and co-champion a task force. There are a proliferation of coalitions, alliances, group funds that are now tackling this. I think we need to pause, and we need to make sure that we're doing this in a coherent, consistent fashion. You also ask about our frustrations, and that's an interesting question. Because when we engage with those on the receiving end, and I mean, I really welcome your remarks, and I think that from Canada's perspective, like probably a lot of donors, as I said earlier, we want our funds to get where they need to. And we trust organizations that have the ability to deliver on these funds to develop those programs and to deliver those at the local and national level. So when we're meeting with country representatives from the developing world, we don't like to hear the problems. Like, we want to hear about the results. We want to hear about how far our money went in generating concrete climate outcomes on the ground. So hearing issues like, I'm not aware of this fund, I'm not aware of this contribution, from a donor country perspective is frustrating. But we need to, again, take a pause, look back, and look at what the issues are. And from our perspective, we really do think that Cfan is part of that solution. And that's why we were extremely proud to provide $9.5 million to Cfan last year. And we really hope that it's gonna go a long way. You guys have already mentioned about your expansion plans, and we're gonna be really happy to work with you guys to make it happen.
Fantastic, thank you so much, Francis. So this next question I'm going to direct towards Mr. Hulse. It is Cfan's ambition to rapidly expand into other regions and countries, and as well as deploy advisors to direct access entities so that we can really create that ownership model of countries and direct access. So more Pacific Islands will receive advisors, and SIDS in other regions, particularly the Caribbean also. How do you think that Cfan can achieve global impact and contribute to these improved types of access modalities in the long run?
Thanks. It's a good question. I think it comes back to the presentation before, and it's already been said a couple of times. I mean, the best way that we can help SIDS and help in the long-term sustainability and development of their countries is to make sure that when they're getting that support is locally led. It is driven by their priorities. We're listening to them. When we're providing that support, we understand the context that they are living within. And if we do that and we work alongside them in partnership, then that will bring the most effective results. That's how we are able to increase climate resilience. That's how we're able to lower emissions and achieve our goals under the Paris Agreement. So the best way that it can be expanded, the best way it can be replicated elsewhere, and the best way it can have that impact is making sure that it's not something that's cooked up in I don't know, some boardroom somewhere else and thinking that this is what's best for the Pacific or this is what's best for Africa or SIDS, and it's not even cooked up in New Zealand or Canada, but it's something that is done on the ground in the Pacific and is working alongside them. So I think that's how you're going to make the impact. That's how you're going to have that global impact you're looking for. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Garrett. And I've just realized that I made one of the biggest faux pas that a moderator could ever do. I forgot to actually introduce Garrett Hulse, fellow Kiwi. I sincerely apologize. We now have in the room Mr. William Lecain, who's lucky enough to be able to come and have joined us. Mr. Lecain, would you be happy to come up and propose a little intervention from PNG? Mr. William Lecain is the Acting Managing Director of the Climate Change and Development Authority, Papua New Guinea. Please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My pleasure to say a few words in this occasion. PNG is happy to be part of the global effort in combating climate change. In terms of the subject matter, what we intend to do in country in terms of governance structure, we have set up a number of policy measures trying to take up issues that are regarding matters of fundraising, financing, so forth. And in order for us to do that, we have set up the Climate Change Authority. We call it Climate Change Management Authority, that is set by the government to focus on issues relating to climate change. On top of that, we have the Climate Change Management Act, passed in 2015, just before we came to COP26. We have made an amendment to that 2015 Climate Change Management Act in order for us to prepare the country towards combating climate change issues in country, also for us to put the mechanisms in place legally for us to do fundraising in terms of financing, looking for financing options. Also, we have put up the NDC. I think we are the 6th country, or maybe correct me there, to put up our NDCs. That is all we know, is that the country's national plan to combat or reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And also, part of that NDC, we are putting up the regulations, relevant regulations, to police or operationalize the Climate Change Management Act 2021. And in view of that, we are expanding our organization. Our government has given us a mandate before we came over to COP26 to expand that institution in form of a regulatory organization, leave the policy part to where it's due, and that's what we are looking at. And this COP, in all our efforts, we are joining hands together by asking our developed countries to give us what is due in terms of our seas and our forests. And only if they do that, we can assist to reduce the climate change effects. Thank you very much.
Mr. Lekain, if you want to take a seat up here in the, sorry sir, if you want to take a seat up here with our honored other fellow panelists. Thank you. So I'm going to now direct another question to Ms. Spencer Henry, as well as Mr. Lekain. We've been talking now about capacity building for a decade, and as well as, of course, the issue of access. Why are we where we are now? And what does long-term enabling environments and sustained climate finance capacity look like to you? And what will it help you accomplish?
Wow, yeah, another very easy question. So first, let's start about capacity building and where we are now, where I think we need to go. So one of the things that I think Cfan is trying to accomplish is to have fit-for-purpose support. What has happened in the past is that climate capacity building has tended to come in the form of consultancies. The consultancies gain the knowledge, they gain the access to the local indigenous population, they understand the context, and they leave with that knowledge. It's not shared with the persons on the ground. And what makes it more impactful is if someone in the local organization can accompany a consultant or accompany somebody who's sharing the advice along the journey. Particularly when you get to implementation bottlenecks, showing how these can be overcome, showing how you can use different financial instruments, not just loans, not just grants, how blended financing can be brought to bear, helping countries to understand how to monitor effectively, provide good reporting, particularly to donor agencies, so Mr. Pigeon can feel comfortable about where his money is going. And this is where capacity building needs to go. So it needs to not just start at project development, but it needs to run the full gamut through implementation, through to M&E. And finally, of course, I spoke about understanding climate rationale. While somebody may be able to explain just freely, yes, we've been experiencing sea level rise, how can they explain that so that somebody understands that scientifically, and how can they quantify the value of that to their local economies, and how financing can help to overcome that challenge? Helping to build capacity in that area is how we improve access, because then a donor understands what your problem is, and they see how they can contribute to solving your problem. And this is where capacity building needs to go.
Absolutely. I can contest to that. I was one of the fly-in, fly-out consultants for a very long time, and that's why I inevitably joined Cfan, is to change that, to stop me being the one flying out with that capacity. So we're actually trying to maintain it in country. The next question, in the same tone of that, Mr. Lekain, Papua New Guinea will be one of the first countries to actually receive a climate finance advisor from Cfan. And before you joined us, I read out some of the projects that Cfan Advisor will be working on, and that includes the National Fund, the Climate Fund, and also working to develop a project pipeline for your nationally determined contributions. Could you tell us a little bit more about the work that you're hoping to do and the projects that you're hoping to develop and submit with the support?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's on.
Yeah, okay, thank you. In terms of capacity, I may be along the same line as my colleague. We, of course, lack capacity, but we identify where the capacity needs are. And the area that we want to go into in terms of capacity building is we identify the capacity needs. And when we get short-term consultancies, the consultancies need to deviate from what we intend to do. And that's one of our problems. And the areas that we identify other areas that we need to do. And the major area, or could be an example where we, like the capacity needs is those technical assistance programs that we get in terms of governance, those areas that I've mentioned, those are the areas that we need to build our capacity, plus our staff, our manpower. From what we are to now, to some level of capacity where they are able to do job themselves or ourselves. And what happens, example, in some of our short-term capacity building technical assistance programs is that most of them come and go, and they left behind papers that get dusted. And we need extension of those technical assistance to put finishing touches to our requirements. And if that's not forthcoming, then I think it's a waste of time. Yeah. So that's the kind of capacity need we require. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lakane. We're very honored to be able to try and support and develop some of the projects that our advisors will be working on, including the National Biodiversity Trust Fund. I have another brief question for Mr. Hulse. You're currently working in the Pacific. You're supporting one of our partner institutions, SPC. If you could just tell us a little bit more about, the work that you're doing with SPC and some of the climate finance projects that New Zealand is supporting.
Sure. Maybe I should start by saying, in terms of climate finance, New Zealand is doing. We also announced a new commitment in the last month of 1.3 billion New Zealand dollars over the next 4 years, from 2022 to 25. Which is 4 times what our previous commitment was of $300 million over 4 years. And that was a reflection of the fact that we realized that we weren't doing enough towards the $100 billion goal, so we wanted to do more. And also a reflection that the needs of the Pacific are so great that we needed to increase our support to support those in the Pacific. And part of our support has always been in the access to finance, and it's been about supporting those regional bodies you talk about, like SPC and the Pacific Community. SPREP is another one who I saw was one of your partners. And so we haven't made too many decisions yet about how we'll spend that new money, but I can speak a little bit about how we do spend it, our current commitment, and it is about supporting some of those regional bodies. As I said before, we want to provide locally led support, and so we provide support for SPC to do the scoping studies, do the design, and then approach some of those funds that you talked about, the GCF, to try and access those funds and get those projects approved. These are in the area. A lot of it is in the area of water security, places where we're doing things with SPC, like Niue, Kiribati, to help with some of the increasing needs around desalination of water, and other issues around water security and adaptation. So these are some of the areas we're helping with access to finance. And I enjoyed the presentation. As you're saying, we are currently not, we haven't provided money yet, but I felt like the presentation before was perhaps a pitch to New Zealand to maybe look into supporting Cfan, because as you said, a lot of the ways that we should be supporting the Pacific, locally led support, getting alongside in partnership is how we're going to get the best results. So let's chat.
Absolutely. Bravo. Putting in the mahi. Mahi means work in Māori, so with that, I just also wanted to reflect myself. Working with SPC, that it was being supported by New Zealand, we were able to secure the Federated States of Micronesia funding at the most recent GCF board meeting for an adaptation project, which is one of the new designs where the funding is deployed directly to local authorities. So they design, develop, and get training to develop their own projects. So we hope with New Zealand's support, we can actually fund an advisor, maybe even an SPC or in Micronesia, which is unfortunately not one of our countries just yet, but they're definitely targeted. Fantastic. So before we go to questions, I just want to ask our panelists one final question. So over a third of our neighbors in the Pacific were unable to attend the conference today due to the dangers involved in coming here, and their small islands that can't be protected as well from COVID. We're lucky to have some representatives from the Pacific here today, but we need to raise the voice and the ambition for those that aren't here with us. So in one sentence, I want from each of you in one sentence, what do you think is the most important thing for delegates and organizers at COP26 to hear from island nations on the issue in climate finance? Now, that is the difficult question because it's only one sentence. Do we have any takers first?
I think a lot of the narrative has been talking about the future, but the future is now. The problems we face are now. We need the help now.
I think the first thing I'd say is we try to not ever speak for the Pacific. We try to let them speak for themselves, and we want to amplify their voices, not ours. But I guess my reflection would be we are not doing enough, and we need to do more. Right. And that would be my message on climate finance to the developed countries who are providing that finance, but also to developing countries that we understand that. And I think myself and Canada, we've shown that we understand that we're not doing enough, and we need to do more for SIDS.
Thank you. For PNG, I think in many forums where PNG is part of it, we always try to cover the Pacific neighbors. They are our brothers and sisters. We face the same issues, and PNG contains the Pacific countries in our messages. So the Pacific countries are part of PNG's messages, so we always contain them. In terms of getting the kind of finance that we need from institutions of finance, financial institutions such as if any COP finance institutions available, or those that we know of, I think COP26 probably may be the last. And I hope many of the Pacific countries may not attend COP27 or COP28, because I think that's enough for us. We might make a U-turn. Thank you.
We're listening.
Bravo, thank you so much. We have time for one question. I apologize
just reflecting on the sales pitch. I'm a historian of SPREP and SPC. Sorry, just reflecting on the sales pitch. I'm a historian of SPREP and SPC, and I acknowledge the problems in the past that SPC and SPREP have both had with underfinancing from like donor countries like New Zealand, like Australia. But a crucial part of both SPC and SPREP over the past, since their establishment, SPC in 1947, first South Pacific Conference 1950, and SPREP, established in 1982, became an independent organization in 1993. They both serve a political function, and the commercialization of things like Cfan stands to lose both like on-the-ground technical assistance and long relationships like New Zealand has with both SPC and SPREP. So how are you going to make sure that these serve other functions? For example, at the first South Pacific Regional Environmental Program Conference in 1982, the first thing on the agenda was anti-nuclearism. So if we go into this new climate world, say COP26 falls over, and we're probably not going to reach the 100 billion goal, all of these things. What does Cfan do politically?
Letitia? This is one for Letitia.
Well, again, Cfan, I think, as well put by our colleagues on the panel, Cfan is not speaking on behalf of the Pacific. We are here to respond to a demand, and we are not setting the objective, we are not setting the goals ourselves. We are working collaboratively with the countries and with the members that are in our network. So we are there to serve, to achieve the purpose that those countries have set for themselves. So whatever happens at COP26, and I think there's a lot of positive signals. I think we started not necessarily on a very good note. The lead up to COP was very controversial on the 100 billion, but I think all the new announcements that came through, the delivery plan, as Francis was saying, access is on top of the agenda. And to my knowledge, this is the first time. We've been arguing over numbers for years, and for the very first time, we actually take a step back and really asking ourselves, are we actually delivering on the ground? So whatever happens here, I think we have already raised awareness about access dramatically, and I'm very encouraged to hear that more and more countries are looking into not just meeting the goal, but also ensuring that the funds are reaching the ground. And I'm also very inspired to hear that we all agree that country ownership is the cornerstone. There's not enough international consultants to implement the Paris Agreement. It has to be implemented from the countries. And that's why we need to grow the capacity. And the regional organization are those that have been entrusted by countries to develop those projects and access the funding. So they are wonderful multipliers. And they also help sharing the knowledge, learning best practices, and ensuring that, and that's what we try to do with Cfan, that within the region, between the region, we will learn from each other to reach maximum impact. So whatever happens here, I think we have already reached some of our goals, which is raising the awareness, mobilizing the support, not only for the 100 billion, but to make sure that when we meet in 1 year, we are not complaining again about things are slow, projects are stalling in the pipeline, but celebrating successes and celebrating that the numbers have went up, and we can actually measure how much resilience has been built and how much of the emissions have been reduced.
Thank you very much for that answer, and that was a fantastic question. Yeah, we've already partnered very closely with SPREP. They're actually developing part of the Cfan training program for advisors, and we'll be ensuring that those advisors from within the region are able to do the stakeholder consultations and raise the voice with these global funds. So they will actually also receive the training on engaging with funders and getting access to finance. So with that, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but it's great that the conversation kept going so long. Thanks again very much to AOSIS for their gracious hosting of this event. We are very, very much appreciative. And also to the panelists for their presence, insights, thoughts, and expertise. We are very, very grateful. While we stand at a great moment in modern history, we mustn't let what's in front of us let our guard down. We need to keep up that strength and push forward to access climate finance and make sure that the capacity is supported on the ground where it needs to go most. As our speakers have effectively demonstrated, climate finance access does not have to be a challenge that is going to overpower us. It can be one that we rise to meet, to rise up against and meet together. And as Letitia said just now, now is the time to do so, and we need to raise that voice. So thank you for joining us today, and have a wonderful time the rest of COP. For those of you who are here for the next 2 weeks, stick it through. I'll be around, and we can get a beer at some stage. So thank you very much for everyone attending.